Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are back at it again here on a Monday on the Snake Sports Talk Show live from Denver, Colorado. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening, thanks for making us part of your night. Chase joining us. Chase, breaking news that happened last night. I was taking a 2-hour nap, and then all of a sudden I look up on my phone, and the trade initially happened. There's lots of Boston fans that are not happy right now. But look, as America's honesty mind, I want to take a few minutes here up on this one before we let our guest up. We got a great guest lineup, by the way. David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. We're talking about Jaden Daniels, Washington, and what is to be expected this upcoming season, and also J.J. Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils. But let me start off with this, because as America's honesty mind, my job is to not lie to my fans, okay? My job is to basically give my unbiased, balanced take upon everything that happens up and in sports, because nothing is ever a coincidence. Anybody that's been here I've known a lot of people within the sports industry, and I talk with a lot of fans outside of, the show. And I tell them all the time, nothing is ever a coincidence when it comes to sports. It never is, whether trades, hires, fires, or, whatever may happen. But Boston right now, I know, seems to be up and in flames. But let me just tell you something about this. I'm going to be cutthroat and deep, okay? Aren't y'all acting the same way when Luka Doncic, when we first got the news on a Saturday night that he got traded to the LA Lakers from Dallas? You all wanted to basically have Nico Harrison's head on a silver platter because it got everybody's attention. And by the way, the regular season was so dull that they needed to have something to react to. I mean, the late David Stern would have never had this happen. And think about it. If we couldn't get the Chris Paul trade, what makes you think that we would get the Luka trade? And then all of a sudden, Adam Silver just pulled the trigger, because look at a lot of our NBA ratings from last year until we got all the way up and into the playoffs, and it got much better. I mean, diehard NBA fans absolutely love the playoffs, and they love the NBA finals because we never had this in a long time. But the news that happened yesterday after I took a 2-hour nap, and I'm actually kind of convinced if I take naps, or if I'm just literally passing out somewhere and I wake up and I look up on my phone and they said, oh, Jake, by the way, Luka just got traded to the Lakers, or, oh, Jake, Rafael Devers is now in San Francisco with the Giants. And you would think you'd get a reaction out of me and go, what the hell? But no. Here's what I will tell you this, okay? Boston has had such an interesting season to start with in Major League Baseball, okay? They did not have the best offense. They were having troubles with it. They just bring in Garrett Crochet. They needed to help out up on pitching. Same thing with Walker Buehler. But guys ended up getting hurt. Okay, this is just what happens. But you know what? You're better off for these players to get this out right now than you are of going into September and October, and then you're screwed. You don't have anybody else, whether in the lineup or in your rotation or even in the relief pen, okay, that you can rely on. So I know everybody's upset about Rafael Devers being traded to the San Francisco Giants. But listen, Rafael Devers last year, and I kept harping about this, that this was horrible last year, is he had a minus 24 run save differential at third base, the hot corner. You cannot have that, even if you're playing up and up and on defense. And we'll discuss that a little bit more as we transition into the NFL. But what wins you the important games, even in the playoffs? Defense. What also ends up giving you the important wins when you're down either by 1 or 2 or you're up, 2 runs? Defense. Rafael Devers had none of that. He was horrible at third base. This is why they brought in Alex Bregman, is because they were trying to fill in the hole. And Rafael Devers was having a little bit, of an emotional state, because it was just like, I'm not moving out of third base. You must be kidding. You're paying $300 million for a player that's only playing one position. That's the reality of Major League Baseball. It happens all the time. This is why everybody's harping for salary caps. But again, if you introduce a salary cap, you are benefiting the owners. And I promise you, in the next year or probably in the year after, there will be a lockout in Major League Baseball, because they're trying to get the contracts right. They're trying to get everybody all lined up. And look, the sport is only going to get better and better. I think the ridiculous rules do not need to be implemented, but it is getting better, where we are starting to witness that times have now been shed, like, drastically when it came to, times of games. They're no longer 3+ hours. They're now starting to be done by 2. So the bottom line is that San Francisco, they bolstered their roster. They did. They bolstered up their offense, because now you got Willy Adames. You now have Wilmer Flores. You got several other players right there, even Matt Chapman. Now, here's the deal, is that he's likely to play first base. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't even consider that either. So that's the kind of thing. But I think, to me personally, I don't see this as a big thing. We'll get to that here in a little bit later, but just hold on to your heads, guys. Don't be freaking out about this whole thing. It's going to take a little bit of time. Let this marinate, and they'll figure it out. So joining us here, talking about the Washington Commanders and what a surprising season that it was for everybody when they made it all the way to the NFC Championship last season. And to discuss that, David Harrison joins us. What seemed like last year, David, is that the season was unpredictable for a few reasons. Because number one, new owner, new GM, new coach, and new quarterback. And it seemed like Washington fans, this was the start of something interesting. And then all of a sudden, you get Dan Quinn, who, in my opinion, I thought was a very good hire because of the fact of defensive-minded coach. He's going to get this right. It's bringing in more of a tougher culture to where you're going to end up getting this, the juice rejuvenated in DC. And then all of a sudden you draft up Jaden Daniels. And then you put all of that together, and to equal an NFC Championship appearance. Dude, that's the most unpredictable thing. And now to go into this year, where now they really got to take advantage of the window that's now opened up for them. How did you really evaluate this past season? And now with them going and getting Deebo Samuel, how they're going to end up reacting for this up-and-coming season? Because it was unpredictable, but I said to people, this team would finish second, but I didn't think they'd get further than they did in the playoffs.
Yeah, man. I mean, last year was just a roller coaster ride of emotions, right? And really, when you look at it, entering the season was all about evaluation. It really was just a year where you got a lot of 1-year contracts. Not a lot of the Commanders who had expiring contracts were brought back. So obviously you have your drafted players, and it was just about establishing a culture, establishing what the Washington Commanders were going to look like under Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. And then from there, figure out who fits, figure out who doesn't, replace who doesn't fit, keep the guys that do fit, so on and so forth. And then this year you do the same thing, but it's a little bit more. Next year it's a little bit more. And like you just talked about, like all the success that they had, like they nailed their algorithm, so to speak. They knew who they wanted. They knew what kind of characteristics they were looking for. So they went out and they got those guys in free agency, in the draft. And it just clicked. You know what I mean? It's a group of guys that really just kind of clicked at the right time and really got rolling. And then, into the playoffs, just playmakers making plays. This year, they kind of did the same thing. Let the guys who don't fit go and bring in new guys who you think fit what you're trying to do. Only now you have it established. There's a culture here. There's a standard here. So now you know what it is these guys are walking into, and these guys accept that challenge of, Dietrich Wise, Jonathan Jones from the Patriots. They know what they're walking into with the Commanders, and it's on them now to deliver on the promise they made to fit in.
So, it's interesting because Washington initially, they flirted with the idea of potentially matching the contract for Lamar Jackson at one point, but then it ended up staying put in Baltimore. Well, now they ended up getting somewhat of a Lamar Jackson-esque player, but I will argue this. I think Jaden, what I've said to people is he's a snap-and-go quarterback. Once the ball is in his hands, he has a certain window, and I think a lot of that is just, he's practiced that many times. He's also come into game speed and studying film where he's adapting to it, to where he either makes a decision of one of two things. He either will tuck the ball in and run if the opportunity presents itself, or he's going to find somebody even in the short or even up and into the midfield and create that to where it's marching the offense downfield. I mean, I think with Jaden Daniels, he's in a very good situation to where there's positive momentum adding on for the Commanders. But now I think, too, because I think about the offensive line, I think about, too, with the offensive weapons as of recently, because we know there's been a lot of buzzes through that. So Jaden Daniels, he's a perfect example of facing adversity. What are we going to expect from him this up-and-coming season now that he's got a full season on his belt?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is even more so than what you expect out of Jaden Daniels is what do you expect from the offense around him? Last year, obviously Terry McLaurin is one of the top receivers in the game, but behind them, you had basically a collective of number two receivers. And while it worked, and obviously, it did pretty good things for them, there was an obvious, effort into going and getting a true blue number two receiver in Deebo Samuel. So you have that trade come in. Then the offensive line, while the Washington Commanders finished in the top 10 for fewest sacks given up, they finished in the bottom 10 with pressures given up. So what that tells you very clearly is it's your quarterback preventing pressures from becoming sacks that make you, rank so high in the lack of sack department. So they went out there and they got Laramie Tunsil. They drafted Josh Connerly Jr. in the first round, all in an effort to make their offensive line, better across the board so that Jaden has better protections. Because one thing that Jaden does really well is, sometimes it's actually funny. You look at a given play and you think, man, he went from read 1 to 2 to 3, found that third window super quick, made that throw. What fast processing he has and everything else. And it's not necessarily wrong. He does have very quick processing, but in reality, a lot of times in those plays, he already knew that third read was the read that he actually wanted. But he also understands that in order to get that third read open, I've got to give this look over here. I've got to give this second look over here in order to get these guys to go where I want them to go, so that when I get back to this third look, it's open and I deliver the ball. And that's something you don't see from a lot of rookies and a lot of young quarterbacks. And as the season progressed, he got better and better at doing that. But then he also got better and better at understanding when it's time to take off, when it's time to extend the play, when it's time to hold the ball and see what you can develop. So now into year 2, you're looking for just the evolution of that process. Get even smarter, get even more comfortable, and now get into where you're commanding the offense. And I don't mean to use that as a pun, but that's just the verbiage that you use. You know what I mean? And even in OTAs, you're seeing him not just correct guys, like say, hey, get another step on the line of scrimmage, or hey, you back up a little bit. I mean, there were moments in their no huddle drills where you're literally seeing him set 4 skill position players, say, no, I want you here, I want you here, I want you here, you here, giving signals, giving commands, basically crafting a play almost at the line of scrimmage. And that's really kind of the next step of the evolution of Jaden Daniels.
So a quick one here for you, because we know that you've been hearing a lot of the buzzes regarding Terry McLaurin and like the entire contract situation. To me personally, I mean, a lot of players have been going through this, and this is always the usual during mini camps, is because a lot of players are expecting a new lengthy long-term contract. I think Terry McLaurin really serves as a pivotal piece in this offense, and especially with the growth build for what he's put together. I mean, he's gone through multiple quarterbacks until he started to come across Jaden Daniels and really took it a step further. Well, I feel like this is now starting to get pushed because of a few reasons. Noah Brown now got carted off out on the practice, and then you got Deebo Samuel, who I think is just that perfect yards after catch ability receiver that Jaden Daniels is going to love, especially for that snap and go type of scheme, to where he can dump the ball off and then you can create yards after you make the catch. So is there going to be a deal done? Because I personally I don't think this is going to be easy for Terry McLaurin to just walk out the door. And we know that negotiations are not always as refined. but they got to obviously get this deal done. You cannot afford to let this guy walk out the door.
Yeah, no, Terry's not going anywhere. That deal is going to get done. It's just a matter of when, not if, and what the guarantees look like and the incentives and the breakdown and the bonuses and all that stuff. And I think that, for Commanders fans who are a little stressed out about it, and for fans of other teams who are like, oh, the longer this goes, the more likely Terry is to get traded. Like what they have to remember is this is most likely Terry's last big contract. Like this is kind of the big swing. This contract's going to take him into his 30s. And after that, it's not necessarily completely unheard of for a receiver in their 30s to get a big payday, but it's not usually it's not as common, right? So this is kind of his last big swing. And look, part of it is he's going to want to get paid for what he's been going through. He's going to want to get paid for look at how much I've produced with quarterbacks that are less than Jaden Daniels. Look what we did last year together with Jaden Daniels. So imagine what I can do with another year of familiarity and comfortability. Imagine what we can do in 2026 even, and so on and so forth. So a little bit of it is selling the future if you're the agent. A little bit of it is demanding recoup. Your client gets recouped for pain and suffering of what he's been going through under his current contract. And on the team side, it's like, look, we want to be able to pay other guys. We want to be able to bring in more weapons so that we can all win Super Bowls. And it's just part of the dance. You know what I mean? And there's no concern over Terry missing OTAs, Terry missing mandatory minicamp. I mean, last time he won an extension with a much worse team than this one, he missed all of mandatory minicamp. He missed all of the OTAs. And all he did was go out and have a 1,000-yard season and ball out, right? So, there's really no concern with Terry McLaurin. I've had Commanders fans ask me, when should you get concerned? You should get concerned if training camp starts and Terry McLaurin doesn't report. That's when you should start getting concerned. Until then, enjoy the dead period, right? Enjoy the vacation.
There you go. A quick one here for you before we let you go. We have not had back-to-back division title champions in over 20 years in this division. Are we expected that to be broken or continue the chain here this upcoming season? Because they have always been an interesting division from here. But what do you think?
Yeah. Listen, on paper, the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team. Like this Washington Commanders roster is incredibly talented. The Dallas Cowboys did some good work. The Giants are going to be better than they were last year. But on paper, the Eagles still have the best roster up and down. The big question there is what their new offensive coordinator is going to do, because Kellen Moore got very, very smart very, very quickly, tried to ride Jalen Hurts for the first 3 weeks of last season, didn't go very well. So then he turned to Saquon Barkley, and he rode Saquon Barkley all the way to the Super Bowl. Is this next offensive coordinator going to try to do the same thing? Can Saquon stay healthy if he does? Those are all a bunch of questions that, is going to ultimately determine what happens with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Commanders have a lot of questions on their defensive side, and whether or not some of these new players like Wise and Javon Kinlaw and all that are really going to make them better up front against the run, which was their Achilles heel. And then, the Dallas Cowboys, with Dak Prescott healthy again, if he can stay healthy, they're always a threat. So, it's a wide open division, but it's also a very competitive division. It kind of reminds me of one of those divisions that you look at. It's almost like the SEC in college football, where if their top team gets, toppled in the college football playoffs, it's because they went through an SEC schedule and got beat up in the process. The NFC East plays the NFC North this year. The Commanders got to travel to Los Angeles. They got to travel to Madrid, Spain. Like there's just a lot of factors that happen here every single season. So, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I don't think that the division is probably going to be clinched until week 16 or so, which makes, for good football for the NFL. So it's hard to predict whether or not they're going to repeat. But, if you're playing Madden, the Eagles are probably going to pull it off. But one injury, and you knock on wood that never happens, but they do. One injury can shift the entire makeup of the entire group.
Interesting. Well, David, appreciate you for coming on by, and let our audience know where they can find more and more of your stuff here getting locked on in the Commanders this season.
Yeah, Locked On Commanders 5 days a week, except for this week. This week I'm actually only about 3 days a week, but typically 5 days a week. And then Sports Illustrated, the commandergameday.com website. And if you're local, WUSA 9, the CBS affiliate in DC, you can also find me there.
There you go, folks. All righty, David. We'll appreciate you for giving your insights here up onto the show, and we will see you soon, and good luck with the up-and-coming season.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're moving on to this because, I've been curious to see what, Cooper Flagg himself is going to look like once he gets into potentially the Dallas Mavericks. But joining us and covering all season long with the Duke Blue Devils and what they were very, very close to getting up and into the big dance. But to cover all of that, JJ Jackson now joins us here on the show. unfortunately, JJ, not the finish that, Duke fans wanted initially, but it was a hell of a ride for the most part because of the fact of we're probably going to end up watching the number one best prospect be drafted potentially to the Dallas Mavericks and Cooper Flag. I will say, watching college basketball, and I paid so closely attention to the Duke Blue Devils for a few reasons. Number one is you are now moving into a new regime past Coach Mike Krzyzewski, and I wasn't sure how, the chemistry of the entire starting five and even with the roster as a whole was going to look like, because even when North Carolina moved on from Roy Williams, this was another interesting one. But I have vastly been impressed with what Duke did this year. So how did you really break down this season? Because especially when you move on from one of the most legendary college basketball coaches I've ever seen in my life to now being the team that almost got this close into the big dance last year.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knew what to expect when you talk about this Duke basketball team and Coach K taking over. I mean, 42 years on the job. It's longer than my entire lifetime. It's longer than so many lifetimes of current players that are on the squad, guys in the NBA. Like, all you knew was being able to associate Duke basketball with Mike Krzyzewski. And now here we are, 3 seasons concluded with Jon Scheyer being the head coach, and it's starting to feel a little bit more normal. You're starting to feel like, okay, this is what to expect. And so much of it is the same. I love the way that Duke went after the hiring process of naming Jon Scheyer the coach and waiting for an entire season before Coach K retired so he could start to build together his top recruiting class. He was able to get in early on Cooper Flag as a prospect. The guy played for Team USA in the select camp before the Olympics, before he ever even played a game of college basketball. And then they're able to come together and put together a 35-4 season, running all the way to the Final Four. Truly, truly impressed with what Duke got done this season.
So, going back to that game that initially ended Duke's season, going back to the play, because to me personally, what I thought of when I saw it several times is Cooper was obviously trying to get a hold of the ball. He was trying to keep the possession up and on his side. But you and I both know, especially when it comes to, crunch time, most of the time the whistles are swallowed. They're never, ever usually called. But in that case up from there, I mean, it changed the trajectory. But I think at the same time, too, I'm not sure you would agree with me, but sometimes I say this all the time with teams. If you get put into this position, there was a reason why you got put into that position. And I look at beforehand that they had a lead. It seemed like things were up and under control, and then they kind of slipped a little bit, and then they ended up coming in this close to where that crucial call on Cooper Flag really changed the trajectory of that. When you saw that play, I mean, what was kind of going through your head? I mean, there was just some of those things that I was like, there was some things that Duke could have done better up and into that position that led up to the play that they would have never have even had to deal with that, and they would have gotten that trip to the Natty.
Yeah, Jake, certainly in the weeks and days that followed, I talked about this game ad nauseum over on Locked On Blue Devils. I've tried my best to forget all of the specific details of that loss to Houston in the Final Four because it just pains me so much and you're just so close to winning the whole thing. But unfortunately, so much of it is still with me. At the end of the day, you made the point right there. Duke had a 6-point lead with 32 seconds left. You put yourself in the position to have your season end in heartbreak like that. The Duke basketball team only made one shot from the floor in the last 9 minutes of the game in a Final Four game. One shot. That's all they did. A Cooper Flag corner three-pointer with 2.5 minutes left. And by the way, this is historically the most efficient offense that college basketball has seen, and you can't score down the stretch there. Credit to Houston for their physicality and toughness there. At the end of the game, Duke got a pull-up jumper from Cooper Flag that he makes a million times, and it just so happened not to fall for him there, and the season comes crashing down to a close. So all Duke can do in a loss like that is look at themselves in the mirror, and now as the days have followed, I think they're being more appreciative of the year that they had in totality. But certainly when you break down the last 9 minutes of basketball we saw from this team that will have all 5 players drafted, 3 starters will be top 10 lottery picks, it's going to hurt that they weren't able to cut the nets down and win the whole thing.
So I think all of us as basketball fans, we're so lucky for a few reasons because of the fact of like we get a chance to watch a lot of the top tier basketball programs that I remember even growing up as a kid, that we've seen a lot of great players that have come from this very program. And I think a lot of that is because they're all associated from the project, the protege of Coach K. But but I think we're about to witness, Cooper Flag potentially into Dallas. When I look at Duke and after the season they had last year and watching Cooper Flag now move on to the NBA, are there any particular players that go and they look at this situation and go, I got to be that next guy to help to set the tone so our whole team could run this baby back and then we could eventually get back in there and get the natty for the next up and coming season? Is there anybody that you could think of on this roster from top to bottom that comes to mind that could really fill in the hole that Cooper Flag left behind there in the program?
Yeah, the Cooper Flag size hole is going to be filled in by Cameron Boozer, who's a true freshman coming in this upcoming season, one of the top players in the entire country. His twin brother, Caden, will also be joining him on the team. And of course, their dad was an NBA All-Star and had a very successful career playing at Duke himself, and Carlos Boozer, a part of the 2001 national championship team. So Cameron Boozer is going to lead the way for Duke this upcoming year. But where Duke stands out amongst the rest of college basketball is that they're one of only 3 teams in the entire country. And keep in mind, there are over 350 Division I teams in college basketball. Duke is one of only 3 that did not have a single player enter the transfer portal. They were able to retain so much of their roster that had eligibility left. Like I said, a couple of guys graduated. They are going to have 5 starters drafted into the NBA level, so you've got to replace them. But nobody said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go find a larger paycheck. They want to come back. And that starts with Isaiah Evans and Caleb Foster for Duke in the backcourt. Those are going to be 2 big pieces next season.
So I had the pleasure of talking with a fellow person in the industry with, covering the NIL and the transfer portal. And, to me, what I love about, college football as a whole is that, the transfer portal in the NIL, it's a new dawn of age in college football to where we're getting used to this thing. We're trying to make it all consistent. But the loving matter of this is that they have such a strong relationship between college and in the pros. And the part of that is because we get the chance to look at these players for about 3 to 4 years max. And they're ready to be day one starters, or they're ready to contribute on a 53-man roster any way that they can. When I look at basketball, it's an interesting situation for a few reasons, because now we're seeing with the NIL that it's allowing college players now to stay another couple extra years to gain the momentum and gain the experience from it. And when I look at Duke, because to me, as a top tier program, much like North Carolina and your Houstons and even your Floridas, when I look at a lot of these other teams, and I've watched this growing up, my birthday's right up and around in March, so I get excited for the tournament. But the thing is that I think we're coming into an age we're not going to be seeing a ton of these Cinderella story programs. Okay. Like growing up as a 90s kid, we've always been used to one-hit wonder music. And so I elaborate that with these Cinderella programs, because when will they ever start to, grow? Like, when will I ever see Wichita State again?
Right.
When will I ever see Loyola Chicago? So I think a lot of that is because with this transfer portal and NIL and basketball, it's going to challenge a lot of these, not going to say bottom, but they're basically these smaller market programs that they know that they've really got to compete and get up to the challenge that these top tier programs. How have you evaluated the NIL? Because especially with a top tier program like Duke, they're kind of sitting there up and into the driver's seat, but they also are thinking about, well, we do have some of these players that if we don't have them starting up and into these rotations all season long, these guys could be up and out the door, and we're going to be now brewing up the next products for the next few years, especially with our recruitments, right?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly starts with the money that these guys are able to earn at this level. I mean, there's a reason, Jake, you look in the NIL era, there's a reason UConn won back-to-back national championships and went on a historic run that we really hadn't seen before since 91 and 92 Duke, since 06, 07 Florida, winning back-to-back titles like that because UConn was able to hold on to so many of their key pieces on title teams. At a program like Duke, when you've got top 10 picks each and every year, when you've got the number 1 pick, you're banking on your next freshman class to be as good as the previous one was. But now what you're able to do is that those fringe draft pick players who earlier might go test the waters, might stay in the draft and hope to be selected in the second round, realize they're actually going to make more money to stay at Duke and to play for a bigger program than in the G League, right? I mean, when you think about the Santa Cruz Warriors or the Mad Ants or all of these crazy G League teams that you've got out there, they're not getting the viewership that Duke is. So why not stay in college basketball, play for the biggest brand that there is in the sport, and continue to improve your game to be ready to be a higher draft pick at the next level and make more money?
Yeah, and it's interesting because especially when I look at these players, my problem with this is that I don't see these players enter into their peaks until year 3, year 4 in the league. And so it's like, G League in the ways doesn't quite, help with some of these builds because you're also getting a lot of these international stars and they're all playing overseas. So I just think that there's that kind of complication in itself. But if they can honestly, if we get basketball players, coming back up and into college and at least play a max of at least 3, because I look at the Steph Currys, what he did up in Dayton. I look at, the Klay Thompsons and even the Draymonds. They stay another extra year up in college so that they can be prepared for that. Because, I mean, you're talking the whole plethora, shoe deals, endorsements, sponsorships, all that stuff, even for an 18-year-old kid. That's a lot of money that they're going to have to handle, but that's where the agents, you're hoping they could at least handle it the best way possible for these kids to have a positive future down the road.
No doubt. And that's something that I think will continue to improve in the years to come as we get more used to this. And so many things are going to change when July 1st hits, and we officially are going to be able to see the House settlement come to play, and universities are able to pay their athletes directly. But thinking about guys waiting a couple of years to make an impact in the NBA, certainly the case for so many guys across the board. However, what Duke has been so successful at doing is that their pitch is that you could play right away once you get to the league, because we will see Cooper Flagg be the number 1 pick this year in the NBA draft. I only have to take you back 2 years to Paolo Banchero being the number 1 pick in the NBA draft out of Duke. And let me go a few years before that. A guy by the name of Zion Williamson did not need to keep playing college basketball. He was ready to go to the NBA. Cooper Flagg's going to go to the Dallas Mavericks. Who's their point guard? Kyrie Irving, who was the number 1 pick in the 2011 draft out of Duke, right? Like, the program that Coach K built and John Shire has been able to continue to take to the next step is so ready to get guys prepared for professional basketball.
Yeah, I'm excited. This year really gave me a lot to where we're seeing a lot of more of these top tier programs. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh, it's rigged. It's outrageous. I'm like, come on, dude. If you don't have, I'm like, I'm not going to sit there up and on the television and just be ranting and raving about Loyola Chicago or Wichita State, because then I'd be an idiot for saying so up and on the radio. Chase would probably smack me across the screen. But, I'm here to watch the Dukes. I'm here to watch the UConns and the North Carolinas. So an interesting one to ask you on this, because we know that the draft coming up a couple of days up from here going to be interesting. But here's my thing. I live here in Denver, Colorado, and I've said it even before I started the show. I said everything that, even with us being in the sports industry, nothing ever that happens in sports ever should be a coincidence. My biggest thing is that living here in Denver, we're so used to scratch tickets. We have the lottery tickets just like other states. To me, I can't stand this NBA lottery draft. I really can't. And everybody's all thinking it's rigged and all this. Well, think about this. You mentioned about a Duke alumni who obviously went number 1 overall after LeBron James left to go to Miami, and he lands up in Cleveland. Right. And then you think about, Zion going to New Orleans after they just moved off from Anthony Davis. And then all of a sudden, it's like you also see the Spurs. They had all their greats retire, and then they get Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah.
This cannot be coincidental when you start seeing a team that just traded away their star player in Luka Doncic to the Lakers, and then they get the number 1 overall pick, potentially Cooper Flagg. Like 14% that there were teams that were highly able to get the number 1 overall pick, and then all of a sudden the Mavs literally had a 0.3 higher percent chance than in the NHL lottery draft and the New York Islanders getting the number 1 overall pick. Like, this is not coincidental. And then I look at this like a scratch ticket. And so a lot of these teams that are trying to quote unquote tank, they won't be able to because they'll end up landing the 11th or in the 15th.
Yeah.
Like, how have you evaluated that? And even with when it collaborates with a lot of these collegiate stars going into the pros, because these franchises, they just want a future star player, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's what they're built on. And so when you can find a star that's been prepared for the stardom at a school like Duke, that's somebody that you're certainly excited for. A historic franchise in the Boston Celtics find themselves with the number 3 pick in 2017, and who falls into their hands than Duke's very own Jason Tatum, who's ready to take over and lead them to, so we've seen this before. Jake, I'll tell you, here at Duke, right down the road in Charlotte, North Carolina, we've got the Hornets, who had the best odds with the Utah Jazz to win the lottery and win the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. So here in North Carolina, the state thinks that Cooper's going to move from Durham to Charlotte and stay in the state playing for the Hornets. But clearly the lottery had other plans.
Yeah, man. I just couldn't even believe it. And the immense amount of just rage bait of it being rigged was just like, I just had to laugh, because it's like, this is just not even a coincidence. We've seen this before. And it's been, I would think it's happened 6 times at least that I can remember recalling it. But yeah, I just thought it was just really, really interesting. A final note before letting you go, talk to me about this coach, because I felt like I haven't really dived in to a lot of like his backstory, but because I'm so used to just watching Coach K and his greatness and all the rest of it. So to fill in that role, like, what should I expect, at least just from the protection of just, the program in itself, what they've always stood for, they strive for every single year, and then building the future products that just make up for why Duke is such great basketball?
Yeah, Duke is certainly a no problem. They're in a really great spot with Jon Scheyer as the head coach. He just finished his 3rd season on the job with 90 wins in his first 3 years. That's the record in the sport, by the way, for the most wins ever in your first 3 years on the job. So clearly this was set up for success. Jon Scheyer, a guy who played for Coach K, he played for Duke. He was the starting point guard on their 2010 national championship team, who, talk about underdogs, talk about Cinderellas. Remember, that team nearly lost to Butler on Gordon Hayward's half-court heave, and Jon Scheyer was the star guard for Duke that was able to get the win there. So he's got the number 1 recruiting class once again coming in this year. He's going to continue to do that year by year. So Duke's going to be fine. They're going to continue to compete for ACC championships, and hopefully they'll be able to win their 6th national championship sometime soon. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Boy, wouldn't that be something? Appreciate you for coming on by here, JJ. Where can everybody look up and tap in here with all of our audiences to get them locked in on Duke Blue Devil basketball and more?
Yeah, absolutely. Football season will be right around the corner, so I'll have plenty of college football thoughts there for Duke. Manny Diaz getting set for his 2nd season as the head coach. Exciting things there for the Blue Devils. It's Locked On Blue Devils wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Be sure to check us out.
All righty, JJ. Appreciate you for stopping on by, giving your insights, man. And strap on in, sit up on the couch, get some popcorn while you're at it before we start to get ready for the draft, and watch Cooper Flagg take that number 1 overall pick, man. Appreciate you for coming on by. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Chase, I mean, look, I'm getting it just as excited about, Cooper Flagg being the number 1 overall pick. I mean, that's just, it has to be obvious.
Is he that good?
He's got, yes. I think here's the reason.
Because how many times have we seen or heard of a guy that is, the projected number 1 overall pick and, the next big thing, and then turns out to be a really gigantic bust in the NBA?
Well, here's the difference, though, is that I think with what's special about Cooper Flagg is because I'm getting
a multitude of a lot of things with just his offense and defense. Because it's like we said, he's capable of hitting those corner 3 shots, which would be perfect for somebody, to get in the wings. The other thing is that he is able to really spread the ball around. He's also able to control and manage a lot of just the time. And even on defense, because he is such a good force to have. I think of it this way. I think he's got the similarity defense of a Klay Thompson in his prime. And I think he's got an offensive set to where it's kind of like, I think it's kind of like up and on the ringings. Like, I'd say it's got a bit of a touch of Kyrie Irving and a little bit more than that because he's capable of hitting those corner 3 shots. So I think he is good. And look, here's the other bonus. You're going into a roster with a fellow Duke alumni. You're also going in there with Anthony Davis. You've got a pretty good roster. Whereas if let's say you went to Charlotte or you went to Utah, I mean, Danny Ainge would be losing his mind if he ended up going to the Jazz. That was the projection, but that didn't happen.
Imagine Cooper Flag and Luka on the same team, though.
Oh my God! Then it's just like, what would you really even need LeBron for after that? Like, you got a pretty solid future.
Like if Luka was able to stay on the Mavericks and everything, you'd have Cooper Flag and Luka Doncic, and that'd be insane.
Oh my God! Then you would really be ringing for Nico Harrison's head. Like you really, really would.
And the fact that Mark Cuban doesn't own the Maverick anymore, like he even said that he would never have made that decision in his entire life.
I think Mark Cuban, because we all know, I mean, we watch Shark Tank. He's a business guy. I don't think Mark Cuban ever in his life would ever make a move to move on from Luka Doncic. But however, here's kind of the break for Nico Harrison is because we know the Lakers have a long-term future deal with Luka. But here's the other difference. We know Luka tends to have some tendencies, especially with his dietary. Okay, that's what they were harping about the last 2 seasons. So they know he's hyper aggressive on an offensive scale. But if I told you, Chase, Luka's got to end up defending that top tier, like he's got to defend Halliburton, he's going to literally get exhausted. And the only reason of that is because we know that he has the experience of shooting and putting up points, and he's a natural scorer. But when it comes to defenses, he tends to have tendencies that I don't like. And that's why I need to have a supplemental supporting role on defense because of that, to account for it. Because, look, you could have 40-point leads, but are you promised to guarantee to protect the lead?
Right.
Always. That's why that's why the Lakers ended the way they did.
Yeah, and I was curious on when Mark Cuban stopped owning the Dallas Mavericks, and it says Mark Cuban does not own a majority stake anymore. He sold in late 2023. He sold 73% majority stake in the team to Edelson and Dumont families for $3.5 billion. However, he is still able to retain 27% minority stake in the team.
Yeah, so he's still, like, I think it's like he got rid of, if I'm thinking of this correctly in business terms, he got rid of the actual majority stake to where he's not in there in the front offices dealing with the problems, dealing with all the other stuff. But however, he is retaining a minority of like royalties, right? Because you'll get something, you'll want at least an extra of at least the royalties because you want to protect yourself, if in fact something crashes, something goes bad, you got the royalties. So that is really interesting. But yeah. I will tell you, though, the new owner, there are a lot of people that are not fond of this. And there are a lot of, I wouldn't say quote unquote conspiracy theories, but there has been rumored article talks that explained about the trade, but it was more than just him being a star player. It was more than that, because ultimately there was more things that added to the actual city of Dallas and to the state of Texas. That's why, like, right now it's such a complicating feel. So there's an article, I think, about it. Go look it up, because it explains the absolute core of why it happened. But still, I think once Cooper Flag is on here in Dallas, that's a finals team. I'm not exaggerating this. This is a finals team. If get rid of the injuries, get rid of all that. If everybody was fully healthy, you cannot deny that is a finals team because you've got bigs, you've got shooters, you've got perimeter attackers and defenders, and Jason Kidd, who knows how to spread that ball around. But the only thing that really bothers me is why he was intrigued about the Knicks job while the Knicks are poaching for coaches. Are you
Didn't Mike Malone get hired, or is he still out there?
He's still a free agent out there.
I mean, the
the
Dallas
problem
Mavericks could use another coach.
They could, but Chase, let me ask you this. The Knicks have done this several times. Okay. And I guess while we're up and on the subject, let's talk about it because I don't think Tom Thibodeau is a terrible coach. He's very defensive minded. I mean, I've watched his teams from the Bulls and, watching his team with the Knicks. But let me be honest, Karl Anthony Towns is just not that kind of pain in the butt where you would need him to be the defender. That's why you got Jalen Brunson. That's why you got OG Anunoby. That's why you also have, you've got a couple of other players to your essence. And because once you got Karl Anthony Towns, you got the points, you got the shots, you at least get some of the rebounds, but you're not getting all of them. And so, to me, Tom Thibodeau, I think they didn't even take time with this. They didn't even allow him to see what they could do next year. That is such a damn good roster that in the end, you can him for getting that close in the playoffs. And then here's the other thing that's also bad. And I think Austin Rivers, who actually did he has a podcast of his own. He literally said that you fire him and you have no backup plan. You have no plan to at least get a different coach. I mean, you're lucky that Mike Malone's even available, but what the hell? Now you're just screwing up the chemistry. And then here's the other thing. They tried to get Jason Kidd. They tried to get Chris Finch, and they tried to get one other player. Are you seriously going to poach? Chase, to be honest with you, I thought he said it perfectly. It's almost like you go to a bar, all right, and you see a healthy couple, married couple, all right, or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then all of a sudden you go up there and say, "Hey, you guys look really happy. Do you mind if I, take it for a spin?" Chase, I would expect somebody to sock me in the eye, and I won't see for the rest of my life if I ever said that. What the hell are the Knicks doing? It doesn't make any sense to me to go out and poach.
That's a good question.
To go and get coaching. Who does that? It makes no sense. Yeah.
It really doesn't. It really does not. But the one thing I do is changing it to a new topic and everything. Yeah. Shohei Ohtani is pitching tonight, man.
Yes, I will be tuned in on that. I will be tuned in on that game.
First time since 2023.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think a lot of this is their pitching just has looked really piss poor. They've been having such issues with pitching that's why that they were very happy that Ohtani would be pitching. Because the offense seems to be fine. I mean, Teoscar Hernandez hit a big-time shot out of the left field against Giants. And so the Dodgers offense is not really having the issues. I think a lot of the issues is that, you look at the pitching. The pitching side of things doesn't really look as solid. But I do want to retract that. And I'd like your input on this too. But when we watched the Luka Doncic trade, okay, you and we were caught by surprise. We literally looked at that thing several times, on social media, and we could not believe our eyes. This is happening the same thing again. Only difference is that why would people literally put the Boston Red Sox in the same room as the Dallas Mavericks? I'll tell you why. Because you all think that he's like this be-all, end-all offensive player, and I got news for you. He's not. Okay, we've been talking about this up and into the program. Okay, minus 24 runs saved at third base, the one position you cannot give up hits and you cannot give up runs. And yet you think the Red Sox are idiots for trading him away? I got news for you. Like, Rafael Devers is a complete pompous. I'm serious. And you heard me say this several times on the show. I will not take a player that I know is not capable of putting his egos aside and thinking about the team that needs him. Okay, a team that needs a contributor and a leader. And he won't do that. Okay, this is why you brought in Alex Bregman. Now, granted, I don't believe the Red Sox should have went about that route the way that it did. But again, life is all about lessons. But at the same time, I don't blame them for going and getting it, because you're trying to solidify something that hurt them last year. It led to L's rather than W's. And then you're trying to go up into first base because Tristan Casas ended up suffering a terrible injury. And then first base right there is open. But then you don't even need him to play up at first base because you know that other corner is not even going to look the same either. So it's like then you're a DH. What's wrong with that? I thought Gabby Miljanian last week put it perfectly on the head when she mentioned about David Ortiz. Because Big Papi was a first baseman, but he wasn't playing there for the majority of that because he had such a solid bat. And they didn't need him to be. I mean, you watch Kevin Youkilis, you watch Mike Napoli.
Gosh, I remember those guys.
Yes, like they've had first bases. Like, oh my God, they even had Mitch Moreland playing first. All because the reason is that you guarantee Big Papi, you're not gonna play on the defense. That's fine, but we want your bat. Okay. Devers is in the same predicament because now you got Matt Chapman at third. You're dealing with Willie Adames up at short. You're never having to deal with that. But then you got Wilmer Flores at first. And they're already talking about likely playing first. Give me a break. Like you're gonna end up playing DH. Listen, you could sit and eat on your money all you want for $300 million, but people to sit here and think that the Boston Red Sox are complete idiots and morons and they don't know what they're doing. They just got 4 players, 3 of them pitchers. One they optioned because one, they want to make sure that he is a healthy Bill. Okay, he's a great lefty. And then you got a reliever in Jordan Hicks. I don't see him being a starter, but you could at least throw him in the pen. And then you got another potential starter up and in there. And then you just got a really good bat that they drafted last year. Well, why?
And not to mention, you get rid of the cancer that's in your locker room in terms of in terms of not being the base or like the guy that is going to do anything to help the team. Like I think that was from a baseball standpoint, somebody that has played it and watched it ever since he was like 5 years old. It is a great decision by the Red Sox because we have seen time and time again anybody that has caused issues for a team, whether it be football, basketball, hockey, baseball. We have seen when they leave a team, the team ends up doing better and gelling a whole lot better. I mean, look at what happened when Antonio Brown left the Steelers. Like, you felt like you lost a massive talent and everything, but you don't have a lot of drama that you're dealing with.
I got a better one for you. I don't think it's drama. I think a lot of it was just financial reasons. But look at what happened to the Nationals when Bryce Harper left. He goes and takes on that massive contract with the Philadelphia Phillies. Can't blame him. He's a great player. But the Nationals the next year won the World Series.
I bet you he was pissed.
Of course he was. Of course he was. And by the
same thing with like what 2022 when they made it to the World Series and lost.
Yeah,
to the Astros.
Well, and that was his first ever World Series appearance. Because here's the other thing: as a fellow Vegas born and raised product, okay, you know that had to itch him really bad when Chris Bryant and the Cubs won the World Series. Because Chris Bryant is also from Vegas and he went to Bonanza. Okay, watching Bryce Harper, as long as I have, even as a kid up in Vegas when he went to Vegas High School, and before he ended up going to CSN and getting his GED, okay, that kid was a phenom at 15 years old. That's very impressive. But at the same time, you watch Chris Bryant go and win a World Series before you do, and then you go and take the deal with Philadelphia to build a culture which you love, and then the Nationals, who couldn't afford you, and they got this young kid named Juan Soto and everybody else that they put their chips in. They had arguably the worst record in baseball, and they won the World Series.
I know, well, that's also because they rode the back of one of the best pitchers in the league at that point in time, Steven Strasburg.
Yes, well, and then not to mention, I mean, we had a time where we had Max Scherzer, we had a time where we had Anibal Sanchez, we had Patrick Corbin, and then you had Daniel Hudson doing the closing role.
Yeah,
so
that rotation was phenomenal.
It was.
And to see the Nationals win their first ever World Series title right before the COVID season hit was amazing.
But think about that right there. That the fact that you let one hitter go and you still have a plethora of pitchers.
And Bryce Harper is only 32 years old, which is insane.
But that's why I'm like, how could we sit here and think that Boston are complete morons? Why? Because if I could go back in time, I wish they would have kept Xander Bogaerts. Not even joking. Because then they wouldn't have this.
And Mookie Betts.
Yeah, I mean, Mookie Betts was just the most ridiculous thing that they could ever do. Next to the Babe Ruth contract. You go to New York. Okay? So we know.
The one thing I will applaud them for is, secretly, they're one of 3 teams that have been talking with Trevor Bauer to possibly give him a chance and come back to baseball.
And look, that could even bolster up their rotation. And look, you have a young roster with Jarren Duran. By the way, the Padres were in talks about trading for him. Yeah, that deal's off because they wanted a very good haul for Jarren Duran. I don't blame the Red Sox for doing that. And that's why the Padres, they're like, yeah, I can't do it. It's just interesting. But the
whole division just got a whole lot better now because, the Diamondbacks have kind of, they're in 4th place, but they've been showing a lot of people that they're scrappy and they can stay with it. The Giants are in 3rd place by 2.5 games.
Yes.
And the Padres
are
playing the Dodgers today. And if the Padres win, they're in 1st place in their division.
Well, here's the thing. The Giants, they got Logan Webb, and they actually have 2 really good starters I like. They are very good. But we know
the Rockies have been winning too since they fired their manager.
Well, that and look, I don't even harp at that as much because it's still an ownership problem until the day it's long far gone. But here's the deal: is that the Giants, they do have scrappy players, and this is a lot of products of Buster Posey. Okay, World Series champion, so he knows how he's going to build together a very scrappy roster. Now,
who is their manager?
It's Buster Posey.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Holy.
All a part of the operations. So
I did not know Buster Posey was the manager of the Giants right now.
Yeah. They kept him very, very close. And
that is insane. That is one thing I did not know.
Yeah. And this is.
And I know everything about baseball almost.
Man, I've lived on this stuff. But here's the thing is don't be surprised if the Boston Red Sox, and here's the thing, they did this before the trade deadline happened. So don't be surprised if the Boston Red Sox, and we just talked about this last week, that they would go out and into the trade deadline and they would end up going and getting somebody that can bolster up this team. Seriously. Because Roman Anthony, Jarren Duran, you've also got Marcelo Mayer. You'll have youngsters on this roster that is going to eventually click. You are better to get this off now than you would be down the road when you're up in September. And the whole point of this is they got rid of the cancer. Now let's see what they look like without it. And by the way, when they made this deal, they won 5 of their last 6 games. That's what a lot of people are wondering. Does this trend continue? Or was this initially, like Nico Harrison, a terrible move? You know what benefited Nico Harrison the most? The Lakers didn't win a title. That's the part that benefited Nico Harrison. And I guarantee you, this will be the one benefit for the Boston Red Sox and for Craig Breslow, that the Giants didn't win a title. Okay? So I know every action comes with a reaction, but can y'all just stop hitting the panic button like your life depended on it? I don't want to get too political, but you're starting to look a lot like those Yahoos, the past weekend. I'm not going to get political, but I was just like, just go keep drinking your beer. All right? I've watched baseball long enough to basically say this is not coincidental. This is not coincidental. And if you think that the Red Sox are idiots, just wait until they win. How many games would it be in a month and a half span? About like 40, 45 at best. Maybe it's even less than that. But don't be surprised if that team wins 25. I'm serious.
Buster Posey is not the manager of the Giants. It's Bob Melvin.
Yeah, no. He's the front office. He's in the upper front office.
Oh, Buster is? Oh, okay.
Yes. No,
I thought you meant he was like managing the team. I was like, when did that happen?
No, it's Bob Melvin still running the club, but it was Buster Posey that's up there in the front offices that he's.
I mean, the dude's 38. He could still play. Maybe not a catcher, but
that's what I'm saying. I mean, but he knows how to build a winning team. Been around it several times. So
he made it to 3 World Series or 2? He wasn't around in that.
He made it to 3.
Because was he around in that 2010?
Yes, he was. He was a rookie.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
That's what I thought. I thought his rookie year.
Because it was 2010, 2012, 2014. What drove everybody crazy is that they're winning in even years. And they win 3 titles in 5 years. What a dynasty that was. So
I know. That's insane. Like, I remember that.
Yeah.
They had Tim Lincecum and one of the a couple of the World Series, and then Washington Garden would be their ace in another one.
Oh, yeah, 100%. All righty, guys. Well, shout out to our guest, David Harrison, Locked On Commanders. We at least got insights what's happening. I actually kind of am in full confidence. I think they'll get a deal done with Terry McLaurin.
Absolutely. They're not going to let their best weapon walk.
Too good of even a leader to even have a team like that let him walk out the building.
And Josh Harris knows it. He's not going to let him walk.
Yeah, exactly. David Harris knows it, man. So, also J.J. Jackson talking to us about Cooper Flagg and Duke basketball, man. What a great time to tap in. Appreciate everybody for joining us here up and on the show. Tomorrow, a special guest with us coming up and on. Former Buffalo Bills offensive lineman Jerry Ostrowski is going to come by and talk Buffalo Bills football and even talking about the state of the offensive line. We are excited.
I got questions for him. I can't wait.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. For Chase and myself, have a wonderful rest of your night, and we will see you guys here tomorrow on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the Monday.